All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Oregon Active Transportation Summit. My name is Anuksha Gardner. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Strategic Partnership Manager at the Street Trust. Welcome to Cameron Bennett and Megan Ramey presenting on how e-bike incentives are used to expand the market and using the bike train to spark a cultural shift. Some housekeeping rules. You can type your questions in the chat or use the raise hand tool, both found at the bottom of your screen. Please use the social media hashtag OATS22 to post about the summit on social media. And don't forget to visit our website at thestreettrust.org to learn more about our other programs and activities. Now, without further delay, please welcome to your screen, Cameron and Megan. And I think Cameron is going first.
Great, thanks Anushka. Awesome, yeah, so I'll go ahead and jump right in, talking about e-bike purchase incentive programs. So this is a project primarily housed here at Portland State with John MacArthur and myself. And we're working with two faculty from the South here, Christopher Cherry from University of Tennessee and Luke Jones from Valdosta State. Really quick though, just want to start out and give a quick definition of an e-bike. So of course that's an electric bike, but the thing that we're really kind of interested in here is the three-class system, which separates these bikes out by their maximum assisted speed. So of course you can pedal the bike faster than these maximum speeds, but this is the maximum speed that the motor will help you out to. And then the presence of a throttle. So those class 2 bikes will help you out to 20 miles per hour, but they also do have a throttle that will get you there as well. So no pedaling required. Vast majority of the rad power bikes operate this way. So a lot of the bikes that you see on the street actually are those class 2s. But for the most part, the programs that we're seeing restrict bikes down to, just the class 1 or the class 2, because the class 3 bikes, introduce some extra safety hurdles with that 28 mile per hour maximum speed. Something to keep in mind here is that these e-bikes kind of come in all shapes and sizes, right? So, we see kind of the more traditional commuter style bikes, leisure style bikes, these step throughs, as well as these cargo bikes, right? That have a whole huge variety of use cases, from hauling kids to hauling groceries. And then, we also have really sort of sport specific bikes, e-bikes that are built to do mountain biking or built to do road biking that we see in the market. So we did a review of 13 popular brands here just to get a general idea of what the price of bikes looks like, or the price of these e-bikes looks like, for the models that we're typically going to see people pick up to use for their day-to-day activities. And generally what we're seeing is that, prices range somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000 for those commuter and leisure styles, generally sitting right about $2,600. And then those cargo bikes are much more expensive, right? Sitting somewhere between $2,000 and like $9,000, with a mean price somewhere around $5,000. So the e-bike market today is, like we heard in one of the presentations this morning, there's something special going on in the market here. We saw for that bike boom in 2020, we saw 122% increase in sales, and then another 53% increase above that between 2022 in 2021. At this point, we're seeing over 1 million units sold each year in the United States, which is pretty exciting. So really fast uptake of this technology today. And importantly, right, we're seeing that this is now a transition from what was before kind of a fringe technology or something just kind of fun to have to a legitimate mode that's really kind of enriching our transportation network, right? This is something that people are using in large scales to get around cities. So again, kind of here's the sales figures comparing the sales for conventional bicycles. So on the left, these are non-powered bicycles. We see that bike boom in 2020. When the pandemic happened, people were looking for something to do outside and they bought a lot of bikes. But then the following year in 2021, sales have gone back down to historic levels, give or take. Whereas for e-bikes, right, we saw that bike boom in 2020 and they've sustained growth looking forward here. And then we see on that graph on the right as well, the breakdown by different categories of bicycle. So we see that a large portion of the market is that kind of transit or fitness style. So those kind of more leisure commuter bikes. And then that largest segment of the market there, the other bikes, I imagine is comprised of cargo bikes as well as bikes whose category wasn't captured at the point of purchase, for the data that we were using here to estimate the market. So why e-bike purchase incentives? The e-bikes offer a really, really great amount of accessibility for people. If you are in a hilly area or you like to dress nice for work and you don't want to get sweaty when you show up, the pedal assist allows for a whole large range of use cases, as well as the ability to haul more cargo, right? So that includes kids or groceries, or whatever else you do in your day-to-day travel. And so they provide a really attractive alternative to vehicle travel. Over these kind of middle distances, anything up to like 15 miles, right? You can do really effectively within an hour on an e-bike. And so, for municipalities that are interested in decreasing the vehicle miles traveled on their system or shifting people out of private automobiles, e-bike incentive programs are a really, really great way to invest a little bit of money to accomplish those goals. So we're seeing those emerge as a really popular technique. So kind of the questions for this work that we were looking at is how price could be used to bridge the chasm of the technology adoption curve for e-bikes. So, we're starting to see the establishment of a really firm market here for e-bikes, but there's still plenty of room for growth, right? The sales figures for conventional bikes are still much, much higher than they are for e-bikes. And so we're trying to figure out how we can introduce e-bikes here as a more whole part of the market, using that price as a mechanism to do so. And so when looking to answer that question, we were kind of curious what the current trends are in e-bike incentive programs in North America, and what the best practices are for administering those programs. So for study methods here, we did a big policy scan of all the existing programs, largely using Google search and Google alerts, and then pulling information from program web pages and application materials. We ran a series of interviews with some of the program managers, and then we've worked on a literature review for existing incentive philosophies to kind of develop some more best practice and some more ideas that may have not come up in that program review. So the results of that inventory, we found 75 programs, looking to incentivize e-bikes in some way in the US and Canada. 38 of those are currently active. And then importantly, 13 of those are only in the proposal phase, right? So they've been floated in the legislature on some level, but not yet passed or implemented. And then the really important number here is that 37 of those programs that have been active or closed are cash subsidy programs. And those are what I'm going to focus on largely for the rest of the conversation here. Here's just a really quick map of the distribution of those programs. Largely, we're seeing that the existing programs today are focused really heavily in a couple of states, right? In California, in Colorado, and in Vermont. But we're starting to see a spattering of others, all around the continent here. But of course, right, still a huge opportunity for some geographic spread, right? We've got a big gap, in Oregon and in Washington. As well as through the whole middle of the country and in the South. So, tons of opportunity for continued expansion of these ideas. We've made all of our data collection for this inventory scan publicly available, and I'll share a link for that at the end here. But we've got, the ability to go in and look at all these programs in particular. So if there's something that I mentioned that you'd like to go see references for, you're welcome to go in and dig into this and see what these programs had to say. So I'm going to run through just a couple of statistics for those programs now, just to give you an idea of what's actually out there. So this is for all the programs, all the different mechanisms that we caught for incentivizing e-bikes. And largely, right, these were cash subsidies in some form, either through a post-purchase rebate or a point-of-sale discount. But there's a variety of other ways that e-bikes could be incentivized, right? Either by handing them out for free, or by providing a lending library, right, where you can borrow a bike for a week or two at a time to try it out, see if it works for your lifestyle. Among those post-purchase rebates and point of sale incentives, we were interested in how they established the amount of money that they were going to hand out. And largely those were flat rate values, right? So no matter how much your bike cost, you were given a specified amount of money. However, there was a significant proportion of these programs that provided cash that was proportional to the purchase price of the bicycle, often with a cap on the highest applicable purchase price on the bike. And then the incentive amounts varied really greatly, right? Largest number of them ended up kind of in that $200 to $600 range. But we're starting to see more and more programs emerge at that really, really high dollar value range. And we'll get into some discussion here later on about what the best practice is for that. And important to note for this graphic, I've included any low income options. So if there's preferential subsidies for people at qualifying income levels, I've included all of those as separate programs for this graphic. So there's a little bit of an inflation on those higher values, that may not be available to the general public, but that's shown in the lighter colors on the graphic. And then the ways that low income was defined for a lot of these programs varied. Largely, it seemed like the easiest way to go about this was by qualifying participants by their participation in any income qualified programs. So we're talking like SNAP or some sort of housing assistance program. But then the next easiest way would be to go by the federal poverty guidelines, which are published by the Department of Health and Human Services. And so we often saw low income qualified as a percentage of those federal poverty guidelines, typically at 200 or 400%. And then funding sources. So these are the folks that are running these programs. Largely it was power districts, right? And there's incentive for them to do so because by offsetting vehicle miles traveled, they can claim that they're performing some carbon offset, which, of course, gets them kickbacks at the end of the day. And then a whole lot of programs are being run by local governments, I think largely because, these policies are a whole lot easier to pass on the local level than they are, on the state or the federal level. And then there's a number of nonprofits and advocacy groups, largely running smaller programs, but there's a number of larger programs being run by those groups as well. So, a lot of you have likely heard about the E-Bike Act that was floated by Blumenauer here, a little bit over a year ago now. At this point, that bill has been rolled into the Build Back Better Act. So, its passing is kind of more contingent on the political bargaining that goes on here over the next little bit. But, if that were to pass, right, we'd see a tax liability credit, which you could claim, on your end of your taxes, set to 30% of the purchase price. However, that'll be capped at a $900 credit and capped at a maximum purchase price of $4,000 for the e-bike, which, if you remember our scan of e-bike prices, right, prices out most cargo bike models. So we think this is a huge oversight, in the writing of this bill, but, it was likely just the result of some of the political bargaining that went on, as they rolled this into the Build Back Better. And then equitable outcomes in these programs are generally pursued through income qualification. We saw about a quarter of the programs were fully income qualified. So in order to get any benefit, you had to meet that threshold. And then about 11% of the programs provided some additional benefits by meeting those low income thresholds. So for the rest of the discussion here, I'm going to run through kind of a recommended program design following this framework here. And one of the outputs from this project is a white paper that we're hoping to have out here in the next couple of weeks that will go through all these points in a whole lot of detail. But for the rest of this presentation, I'm just gonna go ahead and discuss the best practice, as we see it. So first step here is to define your guiding principles. And here it's really important that the goals of the program kind of reflect the provider's priorities and reflect the benefits that e-bikes can provide for a community. Right, and so that's going to vary largely by area, but the overarching idea is that VMT reduction is good for a whole lot of different things, and so you can parameterize that in any different way that you want. And then right from the start, we're going to want to start thinking about our assessment metrics because that's going to allow us to understand, how successful this program is and how to iterate it going into the future. And then really, this is the most important point here is that you want to really focus on inducing new purchases, right? So if you're handing out money to people who were already planning on purchasing an e-bike, that's a waste of money for your program and doesn't actually net any positive gain. So it's really important that the programs are designed in a way that there is a focus on bringing new people into the e-bike market that may have not otherwise had access to doing so. And so an important part of that is identifying your target population. So it's totally acceptable to hand out money to the general public. It just may be less efficient than focusing your subsidy cash in some other way, generally by handing out money to low income folks for whom this large purchase price for these e-bikes might be more of a barrier. And so, yeah, generally, right, this is going to need to be reflected again in those program goals and in the goals of the body that's administering this program. And this will vary largely, program to program. But generally what we're seeing is, the best outcomes come when your target population is defined a little bit more narrowly. And the next step would be to define the types of bikes to be included. And here the big idea is that the more bikes you provide, the more choice your consumers will have and the better off everyone will be, right? Because you're going to provide for a wider variety of use cases. If you include cargo bikes specifically, right, you're catching a much larger portion of the market, and allowing more and more people to replace their vehicle trips, with an e-bike, which is the ultimate goal here. And then another important consideration here is to think about where people are going to pick up these bikes. And of course, you want to give priority to your local retailers, because keeping money, in your local system is the best way to go about it, especially if you're, a local or municipal government here. But also because those local bike shops are going to allow participants to have a place where they can easily go to have reliable service, which is maybe more difficult on bikes that they would purchase online. Having some level of support and community on that is really great. And then also, when participants are going to make purchase decisions, it's useful to have a place where they can go to demo bikes prior to picking them up. However, online retailers may be useful because they maximize choice again to the consumer, and they minimize pipeline challenges. This is what we've heard from programs, particularly in smaller local areas. Think like Corvallis in Oregon, that when there's only one or two shops that are selling these bikes, and there's a number of models that are in high demand, with the introduction of an incentive program, demand goes up faster than the pipeline can manage. And so, we see issues with people being able to actually get the bikes. Next step here would be to select some incentive amounts. And, like I said, having preferential benefits for people at lower incomes is a really effective way to go about this. And so we've heard this called a targeted universalism approach. This was coined by the folks running a program up in Saanich in BC. And the idea here, right, is that the lower your income is, the more benefit you get. With the idea being that this is going to be the most efficient way to incentivize new purchases. Another way that you can go about incentive setting here is doing a local price sensitivity survey. So, literally asking your constituents how much money it would take to convince them. And this is how Corvallis, Oregon went about their program. And it seems to be a really effective way. Of course, we're really interested in minimizing barriers to participants, and a flat rebate is a really great way to go about that. Just because this is a much more equitable way to go ahead and to distribute those funds. Because if I'm more able to put in extra cash to buy a bike up front than other people, it's not fair that I should receive more of a rebate. Right, so the flat rebate amount means that everyone's on a level playing field for the amount that they get, regardless of the amount that they're putting into the bike themselves. And then monetizing externalities is another way that you can, select these incentive amounts. So, particular the program in one of the programs in Vermont did some math and figured out that through the life of an e-bike, right, it's going to offset somewhere on the order of $300 of greenhouse gas fees that the power district would have been assessed. And so the savings were passed on to the constituents there in the form of a $200 incentive. But there's a number of other different ways that, a number of other different externalities that could be monetized, to parameterize some level of incentive setting. And an interesting piece that, you can read more about in the white paper here when it comes out is that, there's been some research saying that basically no matter what the incentive level is set to, up to $1,500 or so, bike shop revenues will outpace that incentive dollar. So if you're a bike shop, right, you can rest assured that your profit margin will be able to compensate for whatever incentives you're giving out. So ultimately, right, the lesson here is that, for this in-demand product, those sales are a really, really effective tool, to continue to break even while building a market really, really rapidly. So as you're looking at program design, defining internal and external process is going to be a really important part of this. And so another way that we're looking to lower barriers for participation is by giving point of purchase rebates rather than mail-in rebates after the fact. And this is so that participants don't need to carry any of that liability themselves. Because if you're asking a participant, right, to carry the value of $1,000 incentive, that may be the deciding factor for them, if they're waiting for their next paycheck to come in and that's too much of a burden. So one of the really easy ways to create some more access here is to give that money up front, either in the form of a rebate discount or through a sales tax waiver, which is a tool that a number of programs have used. And then one way to lower administrative burden here is to use a third party for income verification. And this is, using the criteria of participation in some other program, something like SNAP or housing assistance program. And then simplifying the application process is great for both participants and administrators, especially if you can keep that process, entirely online. That makes things a whole lot easier to track. And then strategic partners are going to be really key to success. So looking at community organizations, which can help both with outreach and education, as well as identification of need and challenge, in the community. Local bike shops are going to be able to speak to any local legislation regarding e-bikes. So if there's laws in the books against using class 3 e-bikes on pathways or something along those lines, the bike shops will know and they'll be able to help out. And then bike shops additionally will be able to help organize demo events and do outreach and education with the community as well. Financial institutions may be able to help pair the program with low interest loans or help facilitate the distribution of funds. And then academic institutions, could be a really valuable partner in doing program evaluation and metric tracking. But yeah, one of the biggest things that to take away from this slide here is that you're really looking to get people on bikes. That seems to be one of the best ways to convince people that e-bikes are awesome, is just riding one. So if you can in any way through these partners facilitate demos, that'll be really, really powerful in helping people take the leap onto an e-bike. So as you're administering the program, really, really important to track metrics. One of the ways you can do that is soliciting feedback, from your partners as well as from your participants. One consideration is that you could brand the program as a pilot. This may help kind of gain political and social support early on because it seems less permanent. But there may also be concerns, as you go to renew the program or scale the program anyway, that it'll be less easy to do so because of that pilot branding. And we hear a lot of concerns about fraud, in the program, people buying the bikes on sale and then reselling them, recreational use of the bikes, or receipt by unintended groups like students or travelers or something along those lines. And generally, what we're seeing is that those concerns often don't come to fruition, and they tend to be cost prohibitive to pursue. So these are things that should really just be kind of evaluated after the fact, rather than kind of worried about really heavily up front. So in program evaluation, right, we're synthesizing that feedback. At the bare minimum, right, we're recommending that program managers conduct an intake survey to collect demographics and motivations for purchase, and administer then a follow-up survey 6 months to a year after. And this is to allow the participants to have enough time to integrate the e-bike into their daily life and have it no longer be kind of a novel item, and really get an idea of how they're using it day to day. Some programs allow participants to opt into tracking, so like clicking through Strava every time they use the bike to get a more minute idea of how they're actually using it. And then we want to evaluate concerns, any of those concerns for fraud or recreational use. This is a great time to do them rather than upfront. So question I get most often is, which programs are the best models? And this, these programs are the ones that I think most directly reflect the best practice that I shared here in the last couple of slides. So we've got one right at home here in Corvallis, Oregon, who's offering a $1,200 flat value incentive, up to $200 less than the purchase price, which is distributed at the point of purchase, so as a discount. And Corvallis is the only program that I know of that administered a price sensitivity survey to their local constituents. Like I said, literally ask them how much money they need to buy an e-bike, and then give them that much money. And then importantly, they used local income statistics to restrict their program to certain income levels. And as far as I know, they're the only program that is doing so on an honor basis, right? So if you were to participate in the Corvallis Oregon program, you're not required to submit any documentation verifying your income. That's done entirely on an honor system. And the reasoning there was to lower barriers again to participation, and to minimize any level of humiliation that might come from having to prove how poor you are just to participate here. Program in Saanich, BC, like I said, is the one who I think targeted or coined the targeted universalism approach, in this particular market. They've got kind of tiered incentive programs with a large percentage of them reserved for low-income applicants. And so those incentive amounts vary from about $280 US up to $1,300 US. as your income goes down, your incentive goes up. And again, distributed as point of purchase incentives. And Sanicheer, didn't conduct a local survey to determine those values for the incentive levels, and for the income thresholds. That was done using econometric analysis from UBC, who was really kind of looking at how you can get the most effect out of the amount of money that you're putting into these programs. And then Denver, whose program just started, I believe, on Friday. They're the only one who's providing preferential benefit for cargo bikes, as well as a really clear definition of what a cargo bike is. And so I've got that listed here, but going to the program website's the best way to go about this. I won't read through it for you now. So what's next? Like I said, we're putting out a white paper with all the results that I just presented here, and a more nuanced discussion of those purchase incentive programs and considerations for their design. And then the next step is a national stated preference survey. So we're doing something similar to what Corvallis has done, figuring out how much money people actually need to make the decision to buy a bike. We're really just kind of interested in all the different factors that might go into designing that rebate level to make it most effective for folks, because no major study on a national level has been done to date looking at those sorts of things. But that's all I've got for you today. If you want to be notified when the white paper becomes available, go ahead and scan that QR code on your screen. All I'm asking for is your email and your name, and I promise I won't email you anything other than, hey, the white paper is available, here's the link. But yeah, that's there for you, and thanks for having me.
Cameron, you have a few questions. So the first question is there any educational finance support programs for back-to-bike purchasers to renew cycling skills?
Yeah, nothing that I'm aware of, although there's a number of programs who have partnered really heavily with sort of community outreach and education efforts, particularly in Colorado. There's a number of kind of smaller scale programs that were really focused on particular groups and getting them cycling that may not have high rates of cycling to begin with.
And the next question is, what is the source of funding for the Corvallis incentive program?
Yeah, so the Corvallis incentive program is administered through their economic development office, and I believe it's Pacific Power is the funding source. But yeah, the best way, if there's any kind of particular interest in looking at these program details, right? I'm happy to, I'll drop the link in the chat here right after I'm done for the program inventory that we did, and folks are more than welcome to peruse. We've got links to all the different program pages on there.
Thank you, Cameron. Megan, are you going next?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, here is my presentation with tons of video links, so bear with me as I navigate this. Hi, y'all. I'm Megan Ramey, and I am very excited to follow Cameron's presentation on these cultural shift tools, borrowing a metaphor from Sam, who's best at metaphors, is e-bikes, and bike trains are the Trojan horses of advocacy. So a little bit about me. I don't know where there's a slide missing. So I'm the founder of Bike About, and I also am on the board of Cat Transit in Hood River, and am the, sorry, a mouthful of background, active transportation representative for ODOT Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation, which is Metro Portland plus Hood River. The just a quick little bit about who I am as a person. I love bike camping and the logistics involved with that. I am a huge fan of music, specifically KXP in Seattle. Nighttime bike riding is one of my meditative acts, and then I secretly love kicking ass at racing cyclocross, which is the only time you'll ever see me wear spandex. Oh, here's the about me. You'll hear that I'm a bike train conductor later, which is probably the biggest part of this presentation. So this was an article that was just published, I believe last week, theconversation.com, and it's super relevant to my presentation. It says, the title was 12 best ways to get cars out of cities, ranked by new research. And number 10 is school travel planning, and 5 to 11% of trips, car trips, can be reduced with school travel planning. And then we were watching Netflix the other day, and this amazing new show just popped up. They know exactly how to prod me, because this show is called Old Enough, and it's about toddlers running errands by themselves. If you have not seen us, it just came out like this past week. It is so good and relevant to what I'm about to present about. And this was, there's tons of articles about this show already, and the conversation about infrastructure and how our kids are getting around independently. So here's the just general outline of my presentation. I'm going to talk about Hood River as this oxymoronic utopia, great bones, huge infrastructure and plans, but we need a lot of grassroots movement and voice. Second is my lessons as an advocate in a small town. Third is our barriers to mobility, which are, like a lot of towns and cities across the US. And then lastly, the Trojan horses of advocacy and how they ignite change really fast. So this is Hood River. I think you all know what Hood River looks like. It's gorgeous and it's very hilly. This is a historic photo of May Street Elementary, the school that I do most of my work with. You see all the bikes in the background, so the culture is there. Oxymoronic utopia is a term I coined when we put together an Excel spreadsheet of where we wanted to see, living throughout climate change, and just what was the place that was going to make us happy. And Hood River ranked really high up on that list. So I quantified why I wanted to move somewhere, and yeah, it's essentially a carless place near wild places. But in actuality, we don't have any bike lanes. This is 12th Street, Highway 281. This is how we shovel and or remove snow. That's the school district building right there. That is, again, Highway 281/12th Street. It's like real life Frogger crossing it. This is State Street downtown. That was just like, I think, $10 to $15 million as an urban renewal project, and we got consolation sheros. And this is how we treat our mobility challenge, because the kids don't have bike lanes. We have to share with people and accessibility devices. But we have fantastic transit and a really good walk score. The historic Columbia River Highway is imminently connecting through to Hood River, which I think will open the floodgates on us being an international bike tourism destination. And it's just so wonderful. I can't wait for this day when it connects. It's going to be huge. It's like known as my, between Hood River and Mosier, is known as my best bike ride in the US. And I've biked many places. Hood River Bridge replacement is coming up, and why that's important is that we're going to get, hopefully, I don't think they'll be able to build it without, but bike lanes and sidewalks to connect Washington and Oregon. And we're doing a Heights, the city's doing a Heights streetscape plan urban renewal project. And this is what it could be. This is a two-way cycle track on 12th. And I'm in full-blown advocacy mode on this right now. the city council just adopted our Safe Routes to School plan, which you'll hear about. All right, so lessons in advocacy. Ooh, this was a painful process for me. So I created, like 4 years ago, it was an epic snowstorm. I created a sidewalk shoveling map. Green is sidewalks that have been shoveled, red is sidewalks that weren't shoveled. And I tried to foster, you know, a little bit of ownership and accountability, and it backfired. I was labeled the queen of shaming. This is where a lot of like called the radical one, come on too strong, crazy bike lady. These are all like these things that I was labeled. But I just tried to move on. The following summer, a group of us organized the first Open Streets event, which was Streets Alive. We created protected bike lanes, demonstration projects, crosswalks. I led a kids' bike parade. We had intersection murals, and it was just a joyous community event that 1,500 kids and people and neighbors all outside. And that led the way to the city really exploring demonstration projects with ODOT, who was using Hood River as a pilot for other towns with orphan highways. And we were going to be the first one, and it still has not been done. But that, going back to that snow shoveling map, I galvanized a vocal minority of people against this project, and they stopped it. It was incredibly painful, and I learned a huge lesson. So pivoting, it's like how I got my groove back was the bike train, and so I'm wearing my conductor hat for the rest of the presentation. So when COVID happened, the principal reached out to me, and I'm going to play you a little video if I can figure out how to do this. The principal reached out to me and said, Megan, we really want to see the students. Can you organize a bike parade? And I was like, of course I can. And so I got a bunch of kids biking in the street to see their teachers for the first time in what, like 4 months face to face. And yeah, it was like, I think like 150 kids and parents. It was so good. And yeah, they, it fostered such I don't know, just like a hunger for, you know what, I need to turn that off 1 second. This is what I was talking about with multimedia. Like, it's going to be hard for me to switch back, but it's important to show these videos. Okay. So the principal was so happy. This is him crying, that when it came time to go back to school, he like essentially had my number top of his hand and like and called me. So now I'm going to transition to how I think about our barriers to mobility in Hood River. We'll come back to bike train in a second, but barriers to mobility and how bike train and e-bikes are a solution to these barriers. So this is just how I think about, like, this is community-based social marketing, like 101. What are the barriers that we have? Like the usual safety on the top, safety infrastructure, skills, routes, hills. We have stranger danger, which is a whole nother animal that's hard to tackle. Bike ownership, bike maintenance, convenience or routine, and then weather. And then the solutions is, I mean, it's like, again, Sam Balto, bike train is the Swiss Army knife of your city issues. And so the bike train has managed to tackle many of these barriers, but really fostering it takes a village, and there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. Is our values we embrace. Then we have the infrastructure. So the black outline is the May Street Elementary zone, and the reddish tint is the hill or hilly areas that you can walk from, but it sits as a pretty gnarly hill to walk up. So good for e-bikes. And then the gray zone is the bikeable area, and the red lines are the Frogger streets to cross. So that just shows you what our barriers are for actually biking and walking to school. This is a great dialogue that happened on Twitter that perfectly just encapsulates the infrastructure problem. Tom Flood, on the rock star on Twitter, he's like, the simple act of walking, biking, rolling your kids to school will forever change how you see our shared spaces. The imbalance and absurdity of it all is shocking. And here's my, picture of us using the bike train to get to school, and how we're on a narrow strip of sidewalk right next to essentially an empty highway. We need protected bike lanes so badly. So enter the Trojan horses, which are the bike train and e-bikes. And mostly this is going to be about bike train, but I had to tie it back to Cameron's presentation just for a couple slides at the end, because e-bikes are also as like a tsunami in Hood River right now. So here is the bike train map and schedule. So this started March of 2020. That's when school was back in session. I can't believe it's only like a little over a year ago. So much has happened, but this was the schedule and the map I made, and we stuck to it. I recruited volunteers that showed up amazingly. It takes a village mentality. And we learned as we went and kind of followed these values of, volunteer mindset, learning the kids' names, being Ted Lasso, which has been mostly a value for me to just really own, as being a good listener, and sticking to a schedule, consistency, rolling with it when stuff happens, and letting your principal be your biggest champion. And so, yeah, joy ensues. This was our ice cream party at the end of the school year last year. The mayor joined the bike train for a ride into school. This was the Safe Routes to School walk audit. We galvanized a bunch of parents to attend. And then, yeah, this is Mariah, one of my favorite bike train members, with her little baby Bjorn and Wolfie in it. So then this year I applied for a $20,000 pedestrian safety grant from ODOT to expand the bike train to include a walking bus, host a safety rodeo, and really tie the two programs in to get free bikes for kids. So I expanded the bike train to include a walking bus and to grow those two programs, which has been growing over the year. And for 2021 Walk and Roll to School Day, which was last October, we did a school street demonstration. And I'll play you a little bit of what that school street looked like. So we shut down the walking and rolling entrance of 9th and June Street. And parents are not supposed to pick up or drop off their kids on this street, but they still do. So there's friction all the time with idling cars and or just safety hazards. Like if you look at it, these kids are just coming out of this rear entrance. They not looking, as they shouldn't, where, to cross the street. And so all that friction was removed with the school street, and it was just joy. You can feel free to check out that full video. So much. Okay, so then just like this past month, I organized the safety rodeo, and I was actually really nervous about this. Lots of logistics. And I have an entire Twitter thread. It's like 20 tweets long on the lessons I learned from hosting the safety rodeo. You can dive in and learn. I'll put a link to this after I finish. But yeah, it was an incredible 2 weeks I had with these kindergartners and fifth graders. 150 kids total. 19 learned how to ride a bike, and we got 10 bikes donated to kids in need. So, these were the highlights. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe no kindergartner in the state of Oregon has learned how to ride a bike through PE class. I was the first one. And because there are no bikes to borrow for kindergartners. So I had to source my own bikes on Craigslist. I got 19 bikes for under $500. I borrowed the school district's bike trailer, and none of them were usable. That flat tires, chains, brakes, just all sorts of issues. So my husband repaired all 25 bikes on a Saturday. The PE teacher was unbelievable. Huge shout out to Eric Harjo. Just he made these 2 weeks just so joyful. And then just taking the pedals off regular bikes makes them balance bikes and helps the kids learn how to ride. Ask your kids, where are the top 5 places you want to ride your bike, or where do you want to ride your bike? And the responses were so good. I can't wait to share this with our elected leaders, because it just shows you that kids, again, going back to that Netflix show, they want to be independent and take themselves places. We learned hand signals. They self-organized games on the agility cones, who could go the slowest and make it through the cones. Learned the e-bike law, lights, helmets, just the basics. I taught them Spidey Sense, and they all kind of knew what Spidey Sense was, but just in relation to riding a bike. And I gave them prizes. Nutcase sponsored some helmets and bells for me. Here is a video of Mr. Julian learning how to ride a bike. And this is him actually, like the moment he learns to pedal. And I was so happy to have Kyle there, my husband, with me to capture this moment. And his eyes, they're just fireworks. It's so magical. Oh, I get super emotional with that one. Okay. So, 19 kids learned how to ride a bike. There were 10 kindergartners and 9 fifth graders that learned. Life-changing. And then because I got to be there with them, and my husband Kyle runs Anson's Bike Buddies, which is free bikes for kids donation program, I got to ask who needs a bike at home. And we were able to get 9 bikes to kids in need. That's me on the right side. That's 5 bikes in my urban arrow, and I ghost rode 1 to the school. That was definitely the Carry Shit Olympics challenge of the year. All right, so transition to Earth Day this past Friday. And this is very, the nerves are still very fresh on this one. I hope I don't get emotional with this. Okay, so Earth Day, the city of Hood River hosted a public open house for the Height Streetscape Plan, which is what I talked about earlier. So 2 big days, Friday and Saturday, to engage the public on the 3 design options that they're offering. And I am actively getting people to sign these postcards on the right of why do they want a better Heights. So it was so perfect when Sam Balto reached out to the fellow bike train conductors and said, we need to do a Earth Day challenge, or Earth Day just camaraderie between all the different bike trains and bike buses around the world. And I was like, perfect. This is so great, because I get to actually get kids out in the street to show, what the induced demand could be for these streets with infrastructure. So we did an ice cream social and free bikes for kids at the open house. And this is the last video I have to go back and forth to. We had such an amazing time that morning. I cranked up KEXP's 6 Degrees of Dolly Parton.
All right, we got it.
And had music, and you can't hear it here, but this is in the background is Led Zeppelin Immigrant Song playing to this. And so you have 40 kids taking to 12th Street in the middle of like Highway 281, riding to Led Zeppelin. And I was like tickled. You can hear me laughing right there. And this just like, there's no better Earth Day sort of protest than kids taking to the street. All right. So that day was followed with another school street demonstration. I got a permit from the city of Hood River to do another school street, and it's actually in our Safe Routes to School plan to do this on a permanent everyday thing where it's just like the barriers come out, no cars are let in or out, and then it's just a friction-free street. So so many parents were like, especially the moms who have to stand there and waiting for their kids. They watch all the near misses. And I mean, I had a mom approach me last week, like, can't we just do this every day? Because I don't want to have to like have this confrontation with drivers. And the people who drive, the parents who drive love it because they just drop their kids off outside the school street and their kids walk to or from their car. So they love it. We had 40 kids on the bike train. And then on this bottom right picture, this is Liliana, who rode the bike train for the first time on Earth Day, which is just goes to show you that these special days, though they're hard to organize, they break the routine and convenience of parents. And so Liliana rode to school that day. Her front tire was a little flat, so I took her home in my bike trailer. And then she started riding this past Monday because she was so excited about bike train. So it just goes to show you the power of these special days. Mike's Ice Cream, I hope you all know, is such a fantastic ice cream shop in downtown Hood River. That's Mike in the top left, who donated tons of ice cream. We biked it up to the to the school grounds. You can see in the bottom left the raptors like on the fence wanting to get at the ice cream. And yeah, it was we had ice cream for all the kids who walked or biked to school. And then later that day, and this is where I start to get a little emotional, at the Armory, which is where the Streetscape open house was, we trailered in, I don't know, we didn't know how many bikes we were going to have. It was like something like 20 bikes, and we didn't even back up the trailer. We couldn't even back up the trailer because we were swarmed with Latino families that wanted bikes. And okay, trying to compose myself. So we gave away 10 bikes, and I couldn't even write down, I have my list right here of all these kids who like, and parents who need bikes now. And I haven't even processed this list yet. So now I have like 11 more bikes to get to families in need. Top left picture is Fabian, whose mom works at the school district. And we had a conversation about Fabian joining the bike train. And she's like, you know, I'm scared because I'm afraid he's going to get hit by a car. I'm like, that's what bike train is for. Like, we're trying to teach these kids skills and get them to school safely. He is now on the bike train after he got a bike that was his very own. So this whole Free Bikes for Kids partnership is so important. All right. I would love to talk more about the Earth Day event with anybody who wants to, specifically about climate anxiety that I am feeling. Okay, so now the Safe Routes to School plan that the city adopted, we have like a laundry list in the middle of very important infrastructure recommendations. And our superintendent submitted the Safe Routes to School education grant that would essentially open up what I've been doing to all the schools in the school district. And it was so supported by all those agencies at the bottom. It was incredibly inspiring process just to submit that grant. T-Rex Better Blocks is doing a demonstration project for us at the middle school, which I'm so excited about. That's a whole nother presentation that could be done next year. Hopefully we get a good demonstration project in the ground in the fall. And then just to go back to the e-bike conversation, Hood River is seeing a ton of tweens and teens on e-bikes, technically against the law, but it's so amazing to see the independence that this is fostering, and hopefully a lifetime of a love for riding e-bikes. And then you have the parents riding the cargo bikes. It's huge. I mean, RAD just must be making hand over fist in Hood River, because it's like the Keeping Up with the Joneses bike. I led a policymakers e-bike ride, thanks to Oregon Environmental Council for organizing this series of rides. It was such a fantastic day on my favorite bike ride in the US, which is the historic Columbia River Highway Trail. And our mayor and a bunch of leaders came on it. The mayor had such a good time. It was so life-changing that she bought a bike the very next day from Oregon e-bikes. And I don't know if I can imagine a better stretch goal. It was fantastic. And now she's riding around experiencing, you know, the infrastructure woes. And then lastly, I just wrote an op-ed in Market Watch about how e-bikes are the most addictive, fun, transformative product on the market right now, which makes them incredibly effective as a car replacement. And yeah, e-bikes and bike trains, it's where it's at. They're the Trojan horses. They're going to just hopefully change everything really fast. So that is all I have. I would love to be a resource for anybody, and or I would love to use anybody as a resource. Group therapy is my jam. So thank y'all.
We have 3 minutes if anyone has any questions for Megan.
I've got one I can lob out there if you don't mind. Thank you for your presentation, Megan. This was really great, and you are doing wonderful work. And thank you. Thank you for stepping into a space where your community needed you, obviously. I'm a city councilor in Milwaukee, and we have a pretty robust program to build out our network of active transportation corridors. And we just completed a really nice, amazing safe route to school outside of an elementary school, where we put in 5 foot wide paths on both sides of the street that are available. No, they're 10 foot. They're 10 foot. On both sides of the street. We're still having pickup issues. This is a major road, so we can't close it down. It can't, it just wouldn't work to do that. Do you have any other ideas about how we might encourage more parents to seriously think about this, about not doing cars to get their kids to and from school? Because we've got an amazing way for them to do it now.
Yeah, I would love to look at the map with you. I'm incredibly map-based to see what can be done in terms of just a temporary demonstration project to get people to think differently. But yeah, it's hard when it's on a busy road. The middle school that I referenced before, they're on one of the major arterials, and we're thinking about doing, how would we do a demonstration school street there? And that would be a big lift. So it's still not out of the possibility. I shouldn't ask you how many cars are per day, but I would love to talk to you about that. And
yeah, I'll be in touch, and I'll talk to our engineers, because I'm sure I can get that number since we just did this project. But it would be fun. It would be really fun to get some ideas from you on how we could really at least do a demonstration project, because it's just begging for a little lift to get people to use this facility. So
Yeah, it's
thank you.
only for 30 to 45 minutes. So if you think about it that way, at the beginning and the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah.